Hello, welcome to the World Builders Anvil Monday Mini for episode 257. My name is Jeffrey W. Ingram. I am one of the hosts of the World Builders Anvil and the founder of the show. And I would like to say hello to everyone as we get into our Monday Mini. Monday Mini is where I kind of look back at the previous episode that just released, episode 257, and I take something that I could have talked about that I decided not to, or something Michael and I ended up skipping in the show notes. And in this circumstance, we're going to say silly was used not just because of Monty Python. And if you've listened to episode 257 at this point, you know that I and Michael quite horrifically went into the election night results skit. We're trying to say some of the character names and failed horribly. So if nothing else, the Monday Mini is worth checking out just to see our utter failure. Now, I hope everyone's doing good out there. And now let's get into it. Now, I use the term silly and not comedy. And that's kind of the thing I wanted to get into a little bit. You know, I think the term comedy that we use in the modern sense has become really way too it's become way too broad of a term. And you know, I was doing some research for the episode, and when the show notes get released on Friday, when the audio is uploaded to Libsyn, there'll be a link to a Wikipedia page about comedy, and it talks a lot about the history of comedy, and really, especially like if you know Shakespearean comedy, or if you've ever read things called comedies from like ancient Greece or Roman plays when you were in college or for fun, you might have been many times going, "Why is this called a comedy?" I'm not. It's not very funny. It doesn't make me laugh, and really. Which leads me to why I call them silly characters, and it's because it was a form of comedy, a very over-the-top sort of screwball-style comedy that Monty Python used in that skit, which I find very funny, which is the reason why I used reference to Monty Python during the episode. But it's really, I think it was like late last century, probably around the time I was born, where people decided that comedy means anything that makes you laugh, you know. Satire, irony, anything that makes you laugh is now under this giant umbrella of comedy. And I have problems with that because one, it complicates the issue when you use comedy. And, you know, the idea is, and I've talked about this in a couple episodes where, you know, if you're working up towards some sort of tragic story, you need comedy to alleviate it. And I think people think that you need jokes and you need sort of this modern definition of funny, which is to make people laugh, but really you need stuff contra to what you're going for. So if you're going for something really painful, you need something much less painful to sort of alleviate the tension in the person engaging in the story, so that when you finally slap down the tragedy, they feel a lot more impact by it. You know, you want the maximum effect. But really, when you look back historically, comedy had more to do with the ending. You know, pretty much anything that had a happy ending was a comedy. Anything that had a sad ending was a tragedy. And usually very horrific bad endings were how tragedies ended up. It was never halfway. And where those two are probably way too broadly used, or at least comedy was way too broadly used back then too, just in a different way. But a lot of the things that we go for in a romance drama would be a comedy in the traditional sense. So, you know, one of the things I think you need to consider when you're taking your world and you are storytelling is that comedy is not something that just needs to make you laugh. So whenever you can use any of the modern varieties of comedy or dramatic elements that aren't the same emotional output as the ending, it will help to a degree pull back from the tragedy that you're trying to build in your main plot. And it doesn't need to obviously be characters. You could have subplots that are comedic, subplots that, your love stories, which I think we did talk about a little bit. But you can mix in different things into subplots and follow those patterns a little bit. And that will help pull back away from the horrificness that is to come. And where I don't think every story needs to be a tragedy, and whatever definition you end up wanting to use for comedy, don't get stuck into thinking that you have to go for straight laughs, especially if you're not a comedy writer. Like I said, I think it could be very difficult to pull off really hardcore joke humor throughout a story. But some people are funnier than others. So like I said, that could say more about me than about the truth of that statement. So, but then again, I think you have to keep in mind too that laughter is kind of the polar opposite of crying. So if crying is what is expected to happen at the end, laughter will probably have the most effect pulling away from that. So even though I'm saying comedy is not necessarily something that makes you laugh, laughter itself is a really strong anecdote. And if you go listen to episode 257, you'll get some of our ideas on ways to incorporate laughter into more serious stories. So I hope you found this useful, and I hope you have a wonderful day.